Hello, Serge here from the back porch. We got a really good comment and questions here today, and it comes from Simply Golf. And he says, okay people, is it a passive hinge motion? Heck, a close-up slow-mo video could settle this. How about a close-up? My sense is there is a normal flex, but that's a guess. No mention here of arching and cupping. Heck, these would appear to create even more havoc than hinging and cocking. I need help. Please help me understand the difference between hinging and cocking. If you try to prevent the wrist from hinging, don't you have to tense up and lock your wrists? I'm back to a passive hinge. If it's aligned handshake, firmness for the grip, let it go where it naturally goes. No need to cock it. Passive hinging. What do y'all think? This goes back a while back when we got into talking about the proper wrist motion in the swing, rotating the forearms and maintaining the wrists. All right, so to start this off, I went and I looked up on Wikipedia the definition of flexion, F-L-E-X-I-O-N, flexion, and it says a position that is made possible by the joint angle decreasing, meaning if I have this angle and which is say this is 180 degrees now, and I go this way with it, that's decrease. And this flatness right here, if I go that way or that way, it's decreasing the angle. And so, that's a good definition. Then I went to Webster's dictionary and I looked up the word flexible. Able to bend without breaking. That's the point. I like to think of flexing, of flexible, flexion, as the fact that the wrist can flex or hinge a little bit, but it doesn't break. Now, if you stand here and you look at your wrists and they roll, and you can see that you can make your wrist go that way. You've got a lot of motion there, which is what we would call that is hinging or cocking. And so when you get that cupping back there, they call that the cup versus a flat wrist. So you see the cup here, see there, and that's flat. And so we really want, in the backswing, we want the top hand, for a right-hander would be the left hand, to be relatively flat. So when we rotate into the mitt, it stays relatively flat. We get up to the top, it's relatively flat. And at that point, the right hand is facing the club face, and the club face would be, if in the golf jargon, if it's skyward, the face is skyward, it's shut. If the face is toe down, it's open. If it's kind of right in the middle, diagonal, it's square. And so we want to play with a square club face because that returns the club to impact square without making any adjustments or compensations. So with all of this talk about flexing and flexation and firm and relatively straight wrists, good wrist action is no wrist action. I've said that 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times probably, and I've written it that many times. And the whole key is remember what the first secret of the Serge secrets are for making a good swing. Golf is a game of angles. The fewer the better. And what do I call the number one angle? The top wrist, the left wrist for a righty, the right wrist for a lefty. And that once you set that up and you have a flat wrist, you don't break it. Breaking that angle does what? Once you break that wrist breaks. In many cases, the fingers of that bottom hand are going to stretch. Why? Because we don't have a whole lot of movement in our wrist that at some point, if you break it enough, it puts enough stress that the fingers have to let go to relieve the stress and strain. And so then we let go, the club drops more, then we grab it, as we have to grab it on the way down, which helps flip it even more the other way. And so good wrist action is no wrist action. When I take my grip and I get here and I finally getting ready and I firm my grip up, I firm it up from the fingertips all the way through the hand, through the wrist, up the forearm to just short of the elbow. And that key is at that point, nothing changes. I mean, you look at most of the good players out on tour, and I think probably two of the best examples would be Tiger Woods. He's as solid and flat at the top as you can get, and many times I see on the blogs now somebody brings up Steve Stricker. Heck yeah, and look at DJ. He stays relatively flat. But what happens is if you just take your wrist in front of you and you look at it, and you come up here, and when I transition and I'm keeping the club above my hands and maintaining that angle, that right angleness from the forearm to the shaft, in many cases the weight of the club puts a little stress on my thumb and in my wrist over here, and what I see is, like just above, as you can see my watch is here, I see a few wrinkles here. That's all. The wrinkles are there, but the wrist stays relatively flat. If I go past that and get a lot of wrinkles all the way here and everything else, and the wrist gets cupped, then I've lost it. I've cupped, it's arched, or whatever you want to call it. it's broken down, it's hinged. That's no good, because when that happens, you lose the muscle tone from the wrist up to the elbow and from the elbow to the shoulder. And you've broken, as I call it, the number one domino. So good wrist action is no wrist action. And so I stay relatively firm. And if you look at me now, you can see that in a good setup, that wrist is relatively flat, and this one is, and the right one is flat. When I come back, you notice that as I rotate, as I rotate the club into the catcher's mitt, toe up with my forearms, both forearms rotating, and you'll notice that there's a cupping in that wrist, but this one stays flat. And I come all the way up, and it maintains a soft cupping in the bottom hand, the right hand for me. And then when I transition down, and the transition pulls the club a little flatter, which I'm fighting, you notice the angle gets a little greater in here until I come down the impact. And when I get to a proper impact, guess what I'm back? I'm back to both wrists are just about dead straight. And guess what happens on this side now? In the backswing, the forward arm was the string. Now I hit the ball, I go into the forward mid, toe up, and look what's happening. The right wrist, the bottom wrist, is now flat, and the left wrist is starting to get a little bit of cupping going on. For every action, there's a reaction. And then as I finally go into forward mid and start to hinge up the tree and lift the club up the tree, there's a little bit more cupping happens in that grip in my left hand, and the right hand staying relatively straight all the way up to the top. So they reverse rolls. But there needs to be one straight one, and that's the string. So in the backswing, your forward arm is the string, and in the forward swing, your back arm is the string. So basically, we're working on maintaining the firmness in our wrists. That's why I want equal grip pressure, equal firmness in both wrists. And the only thing that you should feel is in a transition, you might feel the club put a little stress on your wrist, which will cause flexion. And flexion means it's not breaking, it's not giving as it says. It doesn't break, the definition said. It doesn't break down, it flexes, the muscles stretch a little bit. But we have very little stretching this way in our hands. It's all, shall we say, horizontal, not vertical. And so all you're going to get is a couple little wrinkles in your skin over here. You're doing good. So hopefully this clears all of this up about wrist cock, hinging, breaking, or whatever you want versus flexion. And you understand how they reverse rolls in the swing, but at start and at impact, they're both relatively straight at their maximum length, which is the muscles from the wrist to the elbow are all both at their maximum length at this time, which means when your muscles are at their maximum length, they're producing good work. And so maximum length means you got the maximum extension hitting to the ball. And if you can straighten your arms out all the way to impact, then your club's at the right length to hit good shots. And that's what we want. So hopefully clearing up this wrist cock, wrist hinging versus firm and solid and not changing. That's it for the search for today, and I'll be talking to y'all again soon.